there was a big discussion around volunteers and the pressures that the whole of Hertfordshire, and probably the country, are facing around since the back of the pandemic, and how time poor individuals are, and actually how collectively we can hope and try and engage the next generation as such and kind of pull those volunteers out. We also spoke a little bit about upskilling around workforce, linking to volunteers, and how we can all collectively share those opportunities that we have on offer, because just hearing people, there's a lot going on, and it's how we share those across the board. A little discussion around kind of physical hubs and venues, and how there's perhaps ways that we can be better at sharing availability in venues and people that are perhaps looking for a physical hub as such, and how we can work together in that shared space. There was a bit around, or quite a bit around, the awareness of opportunities, and a couple of discussions around the service of frontline, and actually is there an opportunity to grow this wider than just Broxbourne and East Herts, and also can we perhaps take that to the next level. So I think there's a wider piece that we can work as collectively. We also talked a little bit around the Mapping Broxbourne project, which sounds really, really exciting, and actually again, is that something the Alliance can kind of take forward now with the network in the room. There was a discussion around the pressures on certain services. We don't have the answer, but I think it's important that we talk about these collectively, and how kind of our medium risk cases are now at that next level, or our higher risk cases, and how we can work together even under a lot of extreme pressures around services and staff. And then I think what stemmed through everything was how important events like today are, meeting new people, sharing those connections. And actually there are, on the tables of the 3 discussions, we've had people that can actually, let's take this away and I can help with that. So I think making those new connections, sharing the challenges, and creating a space like today to have those conversations.
Oh, thank you very much. There's lots of groups. And I'm very pleased to say that pretty much everybody had engaged in training. Some willing people than others. But it does look like people really are recognising its importance. And utilising lots of different types of training that are out there. It's good to hear about the range that people are using. In terms of, I found this incredibly interesting to find out the way that different organisations are supporting their individuals. So unsurprisingly, perhaps the really big organisations have got great policies and putting their funding aside, hours, having lots of structure, whereas for a small organisation, it is more of a challenge to make sure that's prioritised, and we've just been talking about the fact that you do deprioritise it, particularly if it's the training for yourself as an individual. It tends to be the last thing that you get round to, particularly if there's a funding cost and you feel perhaps that you're taking that funding from your organisation where it could be used for something else. So that's perhaps something we should address, and really recognising the fact that upskilling and investing in yourself and your skills is worth it in the long run. Short term, maybe on that day, yeah, it's money and it's time, but long term the benefit is certainly there. We also talked a bit about online versus in-person training. I find this a real challenge whenever we plan our training programme, and people say sometimes they like online, sometimes they like in person, but one thing that everybody says about in person is that they love this. They love being in a room with other people, talking and making connections, and the value in that is fantastic, which is why it's so nice to be here today with everybody.
The same opening question with all of you is what, not talking about lockdown, but what kind of came out of lockdown that you were still doing in terms of kind of digital, whether that is in marketing or whether that's in communications. And there's a lot of positive stuff, but for an awful lot of the organisations, it was about getting higher reach. Having online presence meant they could reach more people in the place from up to a national level in one case, from what used to be local to being able to reach nationally. And also when we're trying to reach vulnerable people, that in some cases, not all, but in some cases they felt more comfortable communicating with people when they were in their own home anyway, because they had a safe space to be there. So that was probably the biggest thing that came out of every discussion, is the fact that this was an opportunity, these digital communications, to reach a far wider group of people, whether it's Hertfordshire Council doing blended learning and doing evening sessions online, which are preferable. I did some for you actually for Haffles. But that was one of the biggest things that we did. The return to face-to-face, though, everyone loved, because it's the fact we like people. Although we did say there's certain people who probably quite love being at home all day, just going, I don't want to talk to anyone, just want to work. But also how we keep the connections going, because remote working is great, it's very efficient, it saves on travel, it's good for the environment. However, it's also not always very good for people's well-being, particularly if people either don't like working from home, I'm going for this young, they don't like working from home and want that social connection, or those people who, when they're working from home, feel isolated. Because a lot of people do go into work for socialisation. So it was looking at some of the ways we could do that, whether it's having open and Slack channels. We were talking about having monthly or weekly meetings with the entire team just to help them understand what the day looked like, what the priorities for the week were, and again, to get a continuous sense of team and connection between everyone, which was fantastic. And I did make a load of notes here. And it's just the fact that, I mean, like I said in my introduction, there's efficiency and there's empathy. And efficiency can be driven by things like Teams and Slack and WhatsApp and all of those fantastic things, those bits of technology that we use. However, we can never replace that human contact. So when we are working, whether it's blended or fully remote, it's looking at means to maintain those connections, make sure people understand what they need to do, when they need to do it, how they need to do it, that they feel supported, that they feel connected, and that they can feel productive, and then everyone is happy. But those are kind of the principal things that came out of our conversations. Hopefully I have managed to. If anybody disagrees or has anything that we should add from any of the tables I was with, please speak now forever. Please. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mike.
To them sort of much more quantitative data rather than qualitative data. So we discussed how we could use some AI tools to help sort that data. Donor management is the big thing at the moment. How we contact the people who support our organisations. And when I say donors and supporters, those supporters could be people who have attended a training course, been part of your project or part of your activity. They all have something to give, even if it's not financial. And that's around promoting how great your project activity service is, whether it's passing that information on and promoting your organisation, whether that's a financial benefit, or, since we're all short of volunteers at the moment, whether they would be willing to volunteer. So it's making sure that not only do you target your funders, but you target the people who are participating in your organisation and activities. We looked at some of the tools, ChatGPT, about you can help it to write a presentation, a PowerPoint. You might be able to put a report in and it will help identify any risks. So how you can use that to save time, because we all suffer from this blank page syndrome when we're starting things, and sometimes it's really nice to get a helping hand. And then we also looked at a bid writing service that you can put in your information about your organisation. It will churn out a lovely succinct, which is what all funders are looking for, succinct funding bid.